Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to take your seats, please, so we can begin with the day's proceedings? I think this is a wonderful sign for what we are trying to accomplish here, that on a Thursday morning in Vienna, there is so much buzz emanating from all of you, talking, connecting, already linking up to find what we hope are progressive, connected networks solutions to the most pressing problems of our time. Your Excellencies, ambassadors, mayors, and the next generation. If you define yourself as next generation, would you mind raising your hand in this room right now? Bravo. There are few venues in this world that have an intergenerational focus and a dedication to what the immediate future that lies ahead. And so I'm duly pleased that in this conference and this entire series, we have made that a particular priority. So welcome to the European chapter of what I think is the most extraordinary global conference and convening series, the Global Climate Resilience Summits. You know, if you're in this room, that you are part of an already ongoing series that in four previous summits, or this is the fourth of a series, and in 3 previous summits in California, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and in Kenya, we have already together, with some of you right in this room, looked at some of the integrated problems that we need to tackle from a global agenda and perspective. Now, it is Europe's turn. In California, we focused in particular on local and county-to-county resiliency plans. In Massachusetts, we looked at how we get whole-of-government solutions operationalized beyond the Commonwealth. And in Kenya, we focused on climate diplomacy, on intergenerational equity, issues that we will take further into this conversation. I'm Catherine Kluver-Ashbrook. I'm Senior Advisor at the Bertelsmann Stiftung, and we are thrilled to be one of the core partners of this particular summit in this absolutely astounding place. Thank you for having us here at the Austrian Academy of Sciences. Partnership, yes, that's your applause right here, Mr. President. Partnership is both vital to the resolution of these serious challenges at hand, but it's also instrumental to building a network that can operationalize together to actively not only raise the questions, but identify where the impetus, the node of solution can occur. And so in leveraging the capacities of science, of activism, of local solutions that can be scaled and right-sized, I think we're in the right room. So I want to thank the Austrian Academy of Sciences, the European Academy Science Advisory Council, and of course, our bigger host, the European Capital of Democracy city of this year, the city of Vienna. Welcome, Mr. Mayor Michael Ludwig. So pleased to be here. So before I welcome the President to give his opening words and introduce our distinguished opening speakers, I just wanted to talk for 2 minutes about the urgency and necessity of this conference. All eyes are already fixed on that large meeting in Brazil, but the implementation of what needs to be ongoing to stem what is, the UN has called this, of course, a crisis of human thriving in which we find ourselves. But we want to turn that into an opportunistic and optimistic way forward. In a world that's fearful of change and looming realities, this is not the time for inaction. The calamity that challenges us is not the moment to sit back and sit on our hands and let the crisis wash over us. It is conversely the time to look at what can happen in the distinct and most likely or most specifically in the places where we are, which is why I am thrilled that in today's summit we have such a strong focus on the local solutions toward these larger problems, and are connecting not only this pan-European network, but building that in to the other summits to come: Brazil, India, Senegal, Australia, Hong Kong, Japan. The Pontifical Academy of Sciences and Social Sciences has done a behemoth work of bringing these communities together, and of course, they are the glue that binds us together today. The concept, and many of you were in the room when the idea of the MAST concept that I want to explain for 2 minutes was hatched about 2 years ago, and that is the cornerstone, the touch point that brings us together. The idea that we need to work predominantly on mitigation, of course, the greenhouse gas emissions, so that we can still, despite all the headwinds that we face, limit warming to below 2%. You're hyper aware of this. But the adaptation, how to engage in adaptation, that second part of the MAST concept is adaptation, how we do it, how we manage risk, how we see risk, how we get ahead of the risk that is coming, and how we prepare our people to deal and work with risk. That's the adaptation piece. And that's why we've put such a great focus on the local dimension. But that doesn't work unless the societal transformation goes hand in hand with that kind of change. A sustainable way of living, achieving, re-grasping, re-reaching for human thriving, that's our goal. It implies, as all of you are very aware, a fundamental shift in values, in behavior. But we also know from every paradigm in leadership that change creates a sense of loss. So how do we hold those in that shift to accept the losses they may feel toward a common goal that ultimately will strengthen our joint humanity? Pope Francis said the transformation is truly, in the sense, an ecological conversion. So how do we make ourselves actors in the idea of bringing others along in a sense of faith, but also in a sense of human morality? I think that's our challenge here and in our daily lives. So as organizers, we hope that these 2 days embedded in the structure of the global summits will allow us to achieve a more exact tailoring, a next generation aspect that creates greater resonance, but fundamentally a better way forward to tackle the integrated climate, socioeconomic, and cultural challenges that go with it. And of course, at the heart of all of this is equity, the fact that we are doing this in an intergenerational format, that fairness and a way of spreading responsibility across various shoulders is what we want to achieve, and will make it easier for us to shoulder these changes. So without saying more, I want to welcome our opening speakers to the stage. We have Heinz Fassmann, the president of the Austrian Academy of Sciences, to welcome you. And then, of course, the mayor himself, Mayor Ludwig, and on. And we will launch straight into our first set of panel discussions. Let me just say one thing that I'm particularly looking forward to. This evening, we will not let you sit statically in those chairs. You will be interfacing with the next generation, presenting, arguing, finding, testing your hypotheses and new solutions. And as someone with 2 small children at home, that to me, no offense to the panels that come before, is the thing I'm most looking forward to. So thank you very much all for being here. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
So, thank you for explaining the concept. Geschätzter Herr Bürgermeister, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, sehr geehrte Präsidenten Joachim von Braun, Wim von Salos und Helen Alford, Eure Eminenzen Kardinal Turkson und Kardinal Schönborn, sehr geehrter Herr Sektionschef Schneider. I'm speaking in German, as you recognize. This is possible because we have some simultaneous translator sitting behind. Begrüßen möchte ich auch noch sehr herzlich die hochverehrten BürgermeisterInnen aus Bologna, Braga, Köln und Paris. Ich darf Sie herzlich zu dieser Konferenz From Climate Crisis to Climate Resilience in Europe at Local and Regional Level bei uns hier im prächtigen Festsaal begrüßen. Das Deckenfresko übrigens stammt vom italienischen Maler Gregorio Giuliani. Es stellt die traditionellen 4 Fakultäten der Universitäten dar und in der Mitte wird gehuldigt Kaiserin Maria Theresia und ihrem Mann Franz Stephan. Meine Bitte in dem Zusammenhang, lassen Sie sich nicht ablenken von der Schönheit dieses Freskos. Bitte folgen Sie den Panels. Wir sind übrigens in diesem Gebäude seit 1857 und unsere Akademie übt im Unterschied zur päpstlichen Akademie 3 wesentliche Funktionen aus. Wir sind ein Forschungsförderer und vergeben Grants, also Stipendien, insbesondere an jüngere Menschen ohne eine thematische Vorgabe, österreichweit. Wir sind auch natürlich eine Gelehrtengesellschaft, a Hall of Fame, mit über 700 Mitgliedern im In- und Ausland, die in einem komplizierten Wahlvorgang in diese Hall of Fame aufgenommen werden. Und wir sind Träger von insgesamt 27 hochspezialisierten Forschungsinstituten, wenn Sie so wollen, von Archäologie bis Z, bis zur Zellforschung. Frau Rieken, die Österreichische Akademie ist in einem gewissen Sinne die Max-Planck-Gesellschaft Österreichs, weil wir Träger der außeruniversitären Forschung sind. Und einige Forschende aus diesen Forschungsträgern werden Sie kennenlernen. Unsere Akademie ist erst 1847 gegründet worden, sehr viel später als die päpstliche Akademie und auch sehr viel später als andere Akademien. Die Habsburger, ich verrate kein Geheimnis, waren nicht immer die größten Fans der Wissenschaft und insbesondere Staatskanzler Metternich zögerte mit der Gründung der Akademie. Wissenschaftler, die auf der Suche nach Wahrheit sind und offen darüber sprechen wollen, das war in Zeiten der Zensur und Meinungskontrolle nicht immer opportun. Aber er hat sich dann unterm Strich nicht wehren können. Die Akademie ist gegründet worden als, wenn man so will, Gelehrtenrepublik. Unsere Akademie ist inhaltlich heute vollkommen autonom. Die Forschenden bestimmen, was geforscht wird. Wir sind dabei der Grundlagenforschung verpflichtet. Aber wenn wir eine Anwendungsperspektive sehen, dann verschließen wir uns auch nicht. Mit bin ich auch in gewissem Sinne beim Thema. Wir beteiligen uns an den grundsätzlichen Fragen nach den Mechanismen des Klimawandels, weil unsere Forschenden dieses Thema als wichtig erachten. Sie untersuchen den Zusammenhang von CO2 und Durchschnittstemperatur. Sie untersuchen den Einfluss anderer Gase wie Methan auf atmosphärische Prozesse. Sie analysieren die kleinräumigen Wetterereignisse und sie achten dabei besonders auf die extremen Wetterereignisse, die uns zu schaffen machen. Und dabei differenzieren sie in der Regel auch zwischen den Städten und den alpinen Regionen, denn die alpinen Regionen sind für Österreich besonders wichtig. Unsere Institute gehen vielleicht einen Schritt noch weiter. Es geht nicht mehr nur um den Klimawandel als solchen. Ich denke, wir alle haben verstanden, dass es ihn gibt und wir wollen die Nutzung fossiler Energieträger einschränken. Schritt für Schritt und so schnell wie möglich. Es geht nicht von heute auf morgen, das wissen wir. Wir müssen daher auch darüber nachdenken in dieser Konferenz, wie können wir Wirtschaft, Verkehr, Energieproduktion, die Gebäude unserer Städte und Siedlungen insgesamt umbauen, damit sie klimafit und nachhaltig werden, eben von Climate Crisis to Climate Resilience. Was das bedeutet, sehe ich an den Forschungsarbeiten unserer Institute. Eines befasst sich beispielsweise mit dem Umbau der Städte. Wie sollen Städte gestaltet sein, damit trotz des Klimawandels Lebensqualität offeriert wird? Wir haben uns generell von der Charta von Athen verabschiedet. von der Charta für letztlich die autogerechte Stadt und wollen heute eine menschengerechte Stadt errichten. Aber funktionieren die autofreien Siedlungsprojekte? Kann die Versiegelung von Flächen verringert werden? Wie können die Funktionen Einkaufen, Freizeit, Arbeitsplätze wieder gemischt werden, damit vielleicht Menschen in einer 15 Minuten Gehdistanz alles erreichen und nicht vom Auto abhängig sind? Wie können wir mehr Bäume in die Städte zurückbekommen, damit Schatten und Kühle herrscht? Wie kann man kostengünstig Dächer begrünen? Und wie können wir den Boden öffnen, damit Regenwasser nicht oberflächlich abrinnt, sondern wie in einem Schwamm gespeichert wird? Und wie können wir, ein Riesenproblem in Wien, die fossilen Gasheizungen in den Gebäuden ersetzen und so weiter und so weiter. Es gibt viele Ideen, viele Modelle und wir brauchen letztlich auch Forschung, damit all diese Ideen und Modelle eingeordnet werden können. Welche Maßnahmen leisten was? Welches sollte man prioritär behandeln? Was eignet sich auf dem Weg zur Realisierung? Ein anderes Institut setzt sich ebenfalls mit Climate Resilience auseinander, aber in einem ganz anderen räumlichen Terrain, nämlich im Hochgebirge. Wie kann der Wintertourismus, der für Österreich wichtig ist, trotz der schneearmen Winter und der kleiner werdenden Gletscher weiter betrieben werden? Wie kann der Wald im Hochgebirge durch neue Nutzungsformen und neue Ökologie bei der Bepflanzung klimaresistent gemacht werden? Welche Raumplanung im alpinen Siedlungsgebiet ist notwendig, damit Hochwässer und Hangrutschungen keine ernsthaften Folgen für die Gesellschaft haben? Was bedeutet das Auftauen des Permafrostes für die Siedlungen, für die Wanderrouten und so weiter? Abermals gibt es viele Ideen und Modelle zur Bewältigung einer Entwicklung, die mit Sorge, aber auch mit Mut angegangen wird. Ich zitiere: Für Trauer, Sorge oder Angst ist in unserer Arbeit nicht der richtige Platz. Man sollte an diese großen Herausforderungen Klimawandel auch positiv herangehen. Insgesamt sind Krisen immer Chancen für eine Gesellschaft, Dinge auch zum Besseren zu verändern, sagt unsere stellvertretende Direktorin des Instituts für Gebirgsforschung, Andrea Fischer. Meine Damen und Herren, der Mensch ist manchmal unmenschlich. Er führt Kriege, tötet andere und zerstört seinen Lebensraum. Der Mensch ist immer aber auch lernfähig. Er passt sich an, lernt dazu und steigt manchmal wie der Phönix aus der Asche. Das gelingt, wenn die Politik die Bevölkerung erreicht und mitnimmt. Eine Politik gegen die Bevölkerung, gegen das Elektorat geht nicht, aber mit ihr sehr wohl. Daher ist, denke ich, diese Konferenz auch so wichtig. Sie regt dann nicht nur zum Austausch von wissenschaftlichen Erkenntnissen an, sondern sie geht auf die lokale politische Ebene, dort, wo sich Politik und Bevölkerung jeden Tag treffen, wo sie auch ihre eigenen Erfahrungen und Erlebnisse austauschen. Und das ist die Frage, die wir hier behandeln sollten. Ich freue mich auf diesen Austausch. Die Konferenz reiht sich an eine Reihe von anderen Konferenzen, wie die Moderatorin eindrucksvoll belegt hat. 2027 wird sie ihren Abschluss finden bei dem Gipfel im Vatikan. Ich wünsche Ihnen interessante Vorträge, neue Erkenntnisse und einen schönen Aufenthalt in Wien, einer Stadt, die sich erfolgreich auf dem Weg zur Klimaresilienz gemacht hat. Dankeschön.
Ja, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, ich möchte Sie als Wiener Bürgermeister herzlich willkommen heißen. Es freut mich sehr, dass diese Konferenz, an der 2 päpstliche Akademien beteiligt sind, die EASAG, die Bertelsmann Stiftung, die Republik Österreich mit dem Ministerium, auch die Stadt Wien, hier Wien als Standort für die Konferenz gewählt hat. Und ich möchte mich ganz besonders herzlich auch beim Herrn Präsidenten Fassmann dafür bedanken, dass wir diese wunderbaren Räumlichkeiten benutzen können und auch diesen inhaltlichen Impuls, den die Akademie der Wissenschaften gerade auch in dieser wichtigen, für uns alle wichtigen, essentiellen Frage bedeutet, dass die Akademie der Wissenschaften hier ganz Wesentliches leistet. Ich schätze immer deine auch persönlichen Arbeiten im Bereich der Bevölkerungsforschung. Das ist für uns deshalb wichtig, denn Städte spielen eine große Rolle bei der Bewältigung dieser Herausforderung, Klimawandel zu begleiten und das, was Menschen verursacht haben, auch positiv wieder zu gestalten. Und es gibt schon so etwas, und du hast es angesprochen, wie einen besonderen Wiener Geist, einen Wiener Spirit, der vor allem darin zu finden ist, dass es eine enge Zusammenarbeit gibt zwischen Einrichtungen der Stadt Wien, wissenschaftlichen Einrichtungen, aber auch der Privatwirtschaft. Und ich sehe viele Möglichkeiten in der Gestaltung, auf den Klimawandel einzugreifen, auch in dieser ganz engen Kooperation. Auch mit der Zivilgesellschaft, mit vielen Menschen, die sich daran beteiligen, auch jungen Menschen. Das ist ja auch der Grund, dass am Panel dann eine junge Gemeinderätin, Nina Abramczyk, die aber auch Vorsitzende für Klimafragen im Wiener Gemeinderat ist, dann berichten wird, was wir uns in der Stadt Wien auch in Zukunft vorstellen. Und einen ganz wichtigen Beitrag im Rahmen auch dieser Zivilgesellschaft leisten die Religionsgemeinschaften. Und ich darf da Herrn Kardinal Schönborn ganz besonders erwähnen, der hier in seiner Rolle als Erzbischof von Wien, aber auch als lange Zeit Vorsitzender der Bischofskonferenz wichtige Impulse dafür geliefert hat, das umzusetzen, was Papst Franziskus genannt hat, die ökologische Umkehr. Dass wir in allen Lebensbereichen darüber nachdenken müssen, was es bedeutet, die wissenschaftlichen Erkenntnisse zu nutzen, um die Schöpfung zu garantieren, auch für kommende Generationen, um sicherzustellen, dass diese wissenschaftlichen Erkenntnisse nicht wie in früheren Jahrhunderten gegen die Kirche verwendet werden, sondern miteinander. Und dieses Miteinander ist etwas besonders Beeindruckendes, das wir auch in dieser Konferenz erleben dürfen. Von daher freue ich mich sehr, dass wir in Wien hier einen Beitrag leisten können, auch durch den Ort der Konferenz. Wir beschäftigen uns seit fast einem Vierteljahrhundert mit dieser Frage des Klimawandels. Wir haben in der Stadt Wien ein Klimaschutzprogramm seit rund 25 Jahren, das auch dazu geführt hat, dass die CO2-Emissionen pro Kopf in Wien halb so hoch sind wie im Österreich-Schnitt. Das ist erreicht worden durch starke Maßnahmen in allen wichtigen Bereichen, zum Beispiel der Mobilität. Wir haben einen sehr guten sogenannten Modal-Split, das Verhältnis von Individualverkehr zu öffentlichem Verkehr, Radwegen, Fußgängern. 3/4 aller Menschen, die in Wien unterwegs sind, benutzen entweder öffentliche Verkehrsmittel, das Rad oder gehen zu Fuß. 1/3 von allen verwenden die öffentlichen Verkehrsmittel. Wir haben derzeit die größte U-Bahn-Baustelle Europas, weil wir die U-Bahn dynamisch schnell weiter ausbauen. Wir bauen wieder Straßenbahnen zusätzlich zu dem dichten Straßenbahnnetz, das wir in Wien jetzt schon haben. Wir sind weltweit auf Platz 6, was das Straßenbahnnetz betrifft, und werden in wenigen Tagen die Straßenbahn-Weltmeisterschaft in Wien haben, die erste dieser Art, um zu zeigen, was Straßenbahn bedeuten kann für Städte, um auch die Zivilgesellschaft mitzunehmen, neugierig zu machen, wie kann eine Zukunft der Mobilität in einer Stadt wie Wien aussehen. Wien ist eine der größten Städte in der Europäischen Union. Wir sind die 6. Stadt im deutschsprachigen Raum, nach Berlin die 2. Stadt und ein ganz wichtiger Universitätsstandort mit rund 200.000 Studierenden. Das bietet uns auch die Hoffnung, dass wir gerade in diesem ganz wichtigen Bereich des Klimaschutzes, gerade mit der Wissenschaft und auch mit folgenden Generationen, ganz eng zusammenarbeiten und kooperieren. Und im Wesentlichen geht es auch, wie ich das sehe, bei dieser Konferenz um 3 wichtige Themenschwerpunkte, nämlich zum einen, wie können wir klimaneutral werden? Wir haben uns in Wien vorgenommen, dieses Ziel 2040 zu erreichen. Das ist sehr ehrgeizig, denn Herr Präsident Fassmann hat angesprochen, wir haben in Wien auch große Hürden zu überwinden. Rund 600.000 Haushalte heizen oder kochen noch mit Gas. Hat eine historische Entwicklung, hat historische Gründe, aber wir setzen da ganz stark auf alternative Energieformen. Zum Beispiel, dass wir pro Jahr in der Größenordnung von 100 Fußballfeldern Photovoltaikanlagen errichten. Auf den Dächern von Privaten, ganz stark aber auch auf unserem Eigenbestand. Wir haben 220.000 Gemeindewohnungen, die im Eigentum der Stadt sind, auf Spitälern, auf Kindergärten, Schulen, überall dort, wo es sehr schnell möglich ist, Photovoltaikanlagen zu errichten. Wir haben sehr viel Geothermie, punktuelle in Wohnhäusern und jetzt auch eine Tiefengeothermie, 3000 Meter unter der Erde, wo wir heißes Wasser verwenden, um alternative Energie zu erzeugen. Das gilt auch für einen besonderen Schwerpunkt, auf den wir sehr stolz sind, weil wir das in enger Kooperation auch mit der Wirtschaft umsetzen. Das sind sogenannte Großwärmepumpen, die dazu führen, dass wir bei der Abfallentsorgung und neu ist auch bei der Abwasserentsorgung nicht Energie benötigen, sondern Energie gewinnen. Wir haben bis vor kurzem bei der Abwasserentsorgung rund 1% der gesamten Energieaufwendungen in Wien für die Abwasserentsorgung benötigt. Jetzt ist es umgekehrt. Jetzt brauchen wir nicht Energie, sondern wir ziehen Energie aus der Verarbeitung von Abwasser, um Zehntausende Wohnungen mit Energie zu versorgen. Und von daher ist das eine ganz wichtige Maßnahme in enger Zusammenarbeit mit der Wirtschaft, diese Klimaneutralität 2040 zu erreichen. Aber es ist gerade für uns Politiker ja auch nicht leicht, sich kontrollierbar zu machen. Denn es ist ein Unterschied, ob man eine Unterschrift setzt unter ein Papier oder eine Überschrift in einer Pressekonferenz erzählt oder ob man es dann wirklich umsetzt. Deshalb haben wir ein Klimagesetz beschlossen in Wien. Und wir haben einen Klimafahrplan beschlossen, dass die Öffentlichkeit kontrollieren kann, ob die Schritte, die wir ankündigen in der Politik, auch umgesetzt werden. Das ist eine Art der Selbstkontrolle, die unseren Handlungsspielraum einschränkt, aber der Bevölkerung die Möglichkeit gibt zu kontrollieren, wird da nur geredet oder wird da auch gemacht. Und ich glaube, gerade in dieser wichtigen Frage, wo es auch um das Leben der Menschen geht, um das Leben folgender Generationen, wo wir jetzt erleben müssen, dass wir immer mehr Hitzetage haben, mehr sogenannte Tropennächte und das vor allem auch ein starkes soziales Problem ist. Denn die sozial schwächeren Gruppen haben weniger Möglichkeiten, sich eine Klimaanlage zu leisten, haben weniger Möglichkeiten auszuweichen in kühlere Regionen. Von daher finde ich das richtig, dass Papst Franziskus erkannt hat, dass eine ökologische Umkehr notwendig ist. Aus klimaschutzrelevanten Maßnahmen, aber auch die Schöpfung zu garantieren, aber auch den sozialen Ausgleich auf internationaler Ebene, aber auch in den jeweiligen Ländern bzw. Städten zu organisieren. Von daher ist Klimapolitik immer ganz eng verbunden, auch mit der Frage der sozialen Gerechtigkeit. Und das ist uns gerade auch in der katholischen Kirche sehr wichtig, darauf zu achten, dass die Lebensbedingungen der Menschen auch gerecht verteilt werden. Und so haben wir auch die Frage gestellt, wie organisieren wir, dass wir alle diese Ziele erreichen. Man muss ja auch die Verwaltung mitziehen. Wir haben deshalb eine Bereichsleitung eingeführt. Da sind alle Abteilungen der Stadt eingebunden, auch alle Unternehmungen. Wir sind ja erfreulicherweise Eigentümer zahlreicher Unternehmungen von Kanal bis Wien Energie, Wohnen, Spitälern, um sicherzustellen, dass die Entscheidungsträgerinnen, Entscheidungsträger in der Verwaltung mitziehen. Wir haben eine Koordinierungsgruppe unter meiner Führung als Bürgermeister für die politischen Entscheidungsträger auch in der Stadtregierung. Wir haben ein Klimabudget, das heißt, alle Maßnahmen im gesamten Stadtbudget müssen auf klimarelevante Maßnahmen abgeklopft werden. Und wir haben einen Klimabeirat, der mich als Wiener Bürgermeister berät aus dem Bereich der Wissenschaft, wo Expertise aus allen universitären wissenschaftlichen Einrichtungen eingeholt wird, um auch die politischen Entscheidungsträger zu beraten, auch zu kontrollieren, sich auch in der Öffentlichkeit zu Wort zu melden, wenn der Eindruck entsteht, es ist nicht immer alles so geschehen, wie man sich das vorstellt. Das gilt auch beim Bodenverbrauch, ein heißes Thema, auch bei uns in Österreich, auch in Wien. Denn wir benötigen mehr Grundflächen für Wohnungen, Arbeitsplätze, Bildungseinrichtungen. Aber es muss auch sichergestellt sein, dass dieser Mix auch Richtung Grünraum erhalten bleibt. Und Wien hat mehr als 50% der Grundfläche Grünraum, der allerdings nicht gleichmäßig verteilt ist. Und wir versuchen jetzt gerade in den dicht verbauten inneren Gebieten durch kleine Wäldchen zum Beispiel, Wien-Wäldchen nennen wir das, 14 haben wir schon gemacht, dort wo wir Freiräume gestalten, zusätzlich zu den 1000 Parkanlagen, solche Wäldchen umzusetzen, um auch eine Reduzierung der Temperatur im dicht verbauten Gebiet herbeizuführen. Und wir haben 14% der Grundfläche in Wien landwirtschaftlich genutzt für den wirklich guten Weinbau. Eine der wenigen Großstädte, die nicht nur viel, sondern auch sehr guten Wein hat, kann ich Ihnen nur empfehlen, wenn Sie Gelegenheit haben sollten, am Abend unterwegs zu sein, zum Beispiel bei einem Heurigen. Es lohnt sich, den Wiener Wein zu kosten, der auch in der Stadt hergestellt und produziert wird. Auch wunderbare Naherholungsgebiete dadurch verursacht in den Weinbergen. Aber wir produzieren auch sehr viel Gemüse in einer Großstadt wie Wien. Also wir exportieren Gemüse aus einer Millionenstadt wie Wien in andere Bundesländer. Wir produzieren 260% des Gurkenbedarfs zum Beispiel, also versorgen das ganze Umland aus einer Millionenstadt mit Gurken. 62% aller Melanzane, die in Österreich produziert werden in Wien produziert. Also nur als Zeichen, dass wir das sehr ernst nehmen, eine Stadt der kurzen Wege herzustellen. Denn nichts spart mehr auch an CO2, als wenn die Menschen so quasi direkt von einer Ackerfläche in unmittelbarer Nähe, ein paar hundert Meter vom Wohnort, sich auch entsprechend versorgen können. Ich will damit nur meinen, es ist notwendig, ein Konzept einer Stadt der Zukunft so anzulegen, dass alle Lebensbereiche überlegt werden. Das gilt für die Mobilität, gilt aber beispielsweise auch für die Klimaresilienz. Das ist neben Klimaneutralität die Resilienz, die man umsetzen muss, um diese Entwicklung im Klimabereich auch zu begleiten und für die Menschen erträglich zu halten und zu machen. Und vielleicht noch einen Punkt, den wir ebenfalls sehr konzentriert im Auge haben, ist die sogenannte Kreislaufwirtschaft. Wir können viel Energie, CO2-Emissionen einsparen dadurch, dass wir daran arbeiten, Produkte, die schon hergestellt, verwendet worden sind, neu zu verwenden. Wir kennen das ist eine heftige Diskussion bei der Bekleidung beispielsweise. In den letzten 10 Jahren hat sich der Besitz von Bekleidung im Regelfall bei vielen Haushalten, nicht bei allen, aber bei vielen, manche haben längere Zeit die Kleidung, aber es gibt viele Menschen, die in den letzten Jahren sehr viel Kleidung ständig konsumiert, gekauft haben. Und wir sehen, das ist ein Riesenproblem. Das gilt aber auch für andere Teile des Lebens. Ich denke da zum Beispiel an Gebäude. Wir haben uns, ich war ja mein Wohnbaustadtrat 10 Jahre und habe mich sehr stark mit Bauwesen beschäftigt. Wir forcieren ganz stark sogenanntes Urban Mining. Das heißt, dass wir von Beginn an, wenn wir ein Gebäude schon errichten, in einem Buch festhalten, welche Materialien in dem Gebäude zu finden sind. Denn wenn es einmal abgebrochen wird, in 60, 70, 80, 90 Jahren, diese Materialien wieder herangezogen werden können. Wir erleben das ja jetzt. Jetzt werden Gebäude oft abgerissen aus der Gründerzeit Haus. Das wird alles auf eine Schutthalde und wird nicht weiterverwendet. Und da ist viel möglich an Materialien, die man weiterverwenden kann. Metalle, aber auch Zemente, Sand, vieles, was wir ganz dringend international benötigen. Das klingt ein bisschen absurd, aber man braucht einfach viel Sand international. Das ist nicht ein Produkt, das es so in unerschöpflicher Art und Weise gibt. Und ich bin dann wieder bei der Aussage von Papst Franziskus, eine ökologische Umkehr herbeizuführen und darüber nachzudenken, wie man mit den Produkten der Schöpfung umgeht, wie man mit dem umgeht, was wir zur Verfügung gestellt bekommen haben, mit der Verantwortung, das auch wieder weitergeben zu können. Von daher freue ich mich sehr, dass Sie heute alle hierher gekommen sind. Das ist ja der Beginn auch einer intensiven, weiterführenden Diskussion. Und ich möchte Sie noch einladen, wenn Sie in der Pause mit Kaffee trinken noch Gelegenheit haben und sich auszutauschen. Im Nebenraum haben wir noch eine Ausstellung präsentiert über das, was wir uns in der Stadt Wien unter Klimaschutz, Klimaresilienz vorstellen. Es ist keine große Ausstellung, ich glaube, sie ist auch sehr konsumentenfreundlich zu genießen und wenn Sie es meinen dürren Worten noch etwas inhaltliche Kompetenz anfügen wollen, ist es eine gute Möglichkeit, sich diese Ausstellung anzusehen. Dazu lade ich Sie ein und wünsche Ihnen für diese Konferenz alles Gute und ein herzliches Glück auf.
Dankeschön. So you see why he's not only the mayor of the city of Vienna, but also the head of the Austrian Conference of Mayors, because he is a man of action and of plans. And I want to just underscore the accountability piece, something that we also piloted when I worked for the mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg, because without accountability to our citizens, we truly, as mayors, as city leaders, are very little. Every network needs a node, In this case, the node of this network is personified by the man who I'm going to bring up on stage now. It's Professor Dr. von Braun. He has shepherded this entire conference series so admirably in our collaboration. He's the president of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and is also, as many of you know, a key figure in German climate policy. So he heads the Center for Development of Research at the University of Bonn. Professor Dr. von Braun, I think without you and your commitment to this, we would not be here, so thank you.
Well, thank you. There are many behind this conference, not just me. Thank you to all of those who have made this conference possible. Excellencies, Eminence Schönborn, colleagues, friends, youth delegates, I warmly welcome you to this event. First of all, together with my colleague President Helen Alford of the Pontifical Academy of Social Science and Cardinal Turkson, the Chancellor of our academies, I want to gratefully recognize the kind cooperation by the Austrian Academy of Science. Thank you, President Fassmann. I want to also recognize the cooperation by you, President Van Salos of the European Academies of Science Advisory Councils. So that's the European body of academies. You will speak in a moment. And I want to especially recognize the Bertelsmann Foundation, the substantive and financial support and intellectual contributions from your foundation, Dr. Brigitte Mohn, were instrumental to bring us together here. Thank you. Mayor Ludwig, thank you for your already excellent and detailed contribution from a city perspective, because we look for these contributions from the cities and from the rural areas of Europe. Adaptation is local, mitigation is global. We have to emphasize a lot more the local. President Fassmann, you introduced in interesting ways your academy. Let me just make a few sentences about our academy, the Pontifical Academies of Sciences. They started in the early 1600s, 1610. Galileo Galilei was a member, a founding member. The academy went through ups and downs. A major contribution of our academy was that it was copied. Others came, looked at it. For instance, the German Academy, my Academy Leopoldina in Germany, had some delegates going to Rome, got excited, and founded 15, 20 years later that academy, and others came. So, tongue-in-cheek, I would say, the biggest contribution of the Pontifical Academy of Science is that it was copied worldwide, around the globe. Free and excellent science, taking a forward-looking view, scrutinizing the science evidence and communicating it to policy and other actors, I think is a major contribution. Our academies are small. Together we are about 120 academicians of excellent scientists, a number of about 25 Nobel laureates. Our academies are a demonstration of the tolerance of the Vatican, because these are not religious academies. Our members are from all sorts of religious denominations. Excellence in science is critical for becoming a member, elected in secret ballots, and so on. So for us, it's a pleasure to be in these halls. We will look up, but we will not get distracted. Special about this conference is it brings together scientists, policymakers, mayors, regional policy leaders, youth leaders, business representatives, faith-based organizations that we find important, and civil society from all over Europe to confront the escalating climate crisis. Our pontifical academies of science and of social science address fundamental questions of science, basic science, quantum, physics and chemistry and astronomy and so on. But whenever we address a science issue, we ask also moral and ethical and equity issues in relation to people and nature. That's our trademark. And we are very pleased to note that leadership of the Vatican is listening to these academies, but beyond. Europe is a very diverse hemisphere, looking at its geography, culture, and politics. We need to capture this diversity in finding solutions to the climate crisis. This is an opportunity for learning, and learning is one aim of this gathering. But we want more, not just learning. In these times when global and sub-regional leadership is shifting, and when respect for science-based insights are undermined by some, Europe must lead in evidence-based climate policies, cutting emissions, and building resilient societies that can thrive despite inevitable climate disruptions. That's why we need also adaptation in addition to mitigation. Europe must not step back from bold climate policies, but must focus on what we call MAST, M-A-S-T, mitigate, adapt, societal transform. Applying MAST must to the European context because it has to be context specific. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference has an impossible dense agenda, sharing best practices from mayors and local leaders, youth-led climate action. We are very pleased to have this phalanx of youth organizations which represent millions of youth here in the room. Financing resilience and innovative insurance is important on our agenda because climate MAST agenda needs money, and there is currently not enough, especially currently not enough for adaptation. Protecting Europe's landscapes, the mountains, the Alpine mountains in particular, and the coastal regions is on our agenda. Foresight and innovation in science, governance reforms, accountability and climate justice. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a draft outcome statement that awaits your inputs during the conference. We don't just want to enjoy and meet and exchange ideas. We need to communicate out of this conference. That's important. I count on all of you to cooperate in communicating what will come out of this conference. That outcome statement, as I said, waits for your inputs during the conference. We will finalize it soon after the conference, and we want to widely share it in Europe and beyond. Europe must lead by action and by example, not only in reducing emissions, but in building resilient societies capable of thriving amid unavoidable climate change, which we need to overcome through mitigation and to which we need to adapt in the coming 3 decades at least. And that all needs to be guided by science, solidarity, and moral courage. Thank you.
Dear distinguished guests and participants, I feel honored in joining here Presidents Fassmann and von Braun and Mayor Ludwig and His Eminence Cardinal Peter Turkson, Minister Tochnik and Dr. Schneider, in welcoming you here on behalf of ESAC at this exquisite and important pan-European summit on climate mitigation, adaptation, and societal transformation. I'm sure you all know what the role of an academy president is, or a mayor, or a cardinal, or minister, or head of a minister's climate section. But I will undoubtedly need to explain to most of you what ESAC is and why and how ESAC is strongly supporting this summit. ESAC stands for European Academies Science Advisory Council. It is the organization of academies in Europe and those of the EU member states, plus those of Norway, Switzerland, and UK, focused on bringing expert scientists from Europe together to give independent science-based advice, policy advice to Europe. We focus on the areas of environment, energy, climate, and biosciences and public health. ESAC is a small organization supported by its member academies, and in particular by the Austrian Academy ÖAW, which presently provides our secretariat. We are extremely grateful to this, and it also means that this building here, this wonderful academy building, feels like our home. We do our work by having our scientists identify bottom-up those topics where independent science-based advice can make important contributions. We then form a working group with experts from all over Europe to write an advisory report and commentary aimed at our policymakers in Brussels and our member states. And of course, then we distribute that. We nowadays view the challenges of mitigation and of adaptation to climate change and the related threat to biodiversity as the big challenge of our societies and of our planet today. So we focus the topics we address increasingly on climate-related issues. Indeed, we have contributed with our work to many of the issues which will be discussed at this meeting, especially those addressed at the sessions tomorrow: climate change and health, regenerative agriculture, wildfires, food security, decarbonization of the various energy sectors, the folly of cutting trees for power generation, and the threats posed to the fact that we transcend almost all planetary boundaries today. We are therefore fully supportive of the call for action of the Pontifical Academies and of the fact that the societal transformation is a key topic of this summit. Indeed, just a few months ago, we ourselves called for increasing urgency for transformative change, and several colleagues who have played an important role in our project are involved here as panelists. In view of the fact that our secretariat is hosted here by the ÖAW and that we are deeply concerned about the climate crisis, ESAC felt honored and grateful when President von Braun invited us to actively support the organization of the summit here in Vienna. We've done so in particular by using our network and our member academies to identify climate scientists from all over Europe, from various backgrounds, gender, and career stages. In particular, those who would be eager to contribute to the success of this meeting, not just by offering their expertise, but also by their ability to take action and to bridge the gap with local and regional governors. And we're very happy to see so many young scientists here. I'm very happy to see many of those who we nominated here at this summit, and I wish you all a very fruitful meeting. I hope that in the near future, we will all look back at this summit as a key meeting promoting action and change.
All right, we are not quite done with our opening segment. I want to welcome His Eminence Cardinal Peter Turkson to offer some remarks, and then we'll hear from the federal level before we launch into today's discussion. Cardinal Turkson.
So just want to introduce small change from just using your ears to also now using your eyes. So, Your Eminence and Honorable Mayor and distinguished guests, members of this community, the President of the Academy of the Sciences has expressed his gratitude of the Pontifical Academies to the holding of this event and to the collaboration from the Austrian Academy of the Sciences. I repeat those sentiments and simply wish to indicate, following up on Professor von Braun's presentation of the Academy, the Pontifical Academy of the Sciences and Social Sciences, basically what we seek to do, particularly for the topic that we gathered here to study, the thrust of the Academy of the Sciences is to heal the carbon story of humanity. If we've talked about climate crisis, it's actually a crisis of humanity's experience with carbon. And the procedure from the Academy of the Sciences is to undertake initiatives towards the healing of the carbon story of humanity. So what you see on the slide is essentially what has happened in the Anthropocene, so-called Anthropocene period, which we characterize as the period in which we are in, which register a lot of the polluting factors which is being the cause of our gathering here. Temperatures are rising 1.5 and above. The atmospheric carbon dioxide is on the increase. Carbon, which should be in the earth, is now predominantly also in the atmosphere. And then we have also the nitrous oxide, the methane, and everything else that helps to cause all of this. I hope I get this right. Didn't change, so I tried this. Okay. So what we see here, if I can get it right, is something that I borrowed from one of us who's here, Professor Schellenhuber. And it is about, you see the small blue point in Britain. That's about the Industrial Revolution, how it began in Britain. And if I can get this going and started. If the Regia can see a small arrow beneath the screen. Okay, so it's on the move now. So you see the yellow and the time scale and how the Industrial Revolution that began in England is beginning to spread over Europe. And it goes over Europe, and going over Europe is also going with the carbon story that we're talking about. And as it spreads there, our throwing of carbon into the atmosphere. So the spread of this is the spread of our, what we call the human story of carbon. And so what began in Europe, in Britain, gradually with the Industrial Revolution, steam engine and everything, it's now become a global phenomenon. And the intensity of it is what you see in the intensity of the colors. So this is the experience which has brought us all together now talking about a crisis. Climate crisis becomes a crisis of our own carbon story, which now the Academy seeks to heal. We're going way back. So these are the guys responsible for this. So what has happened is precisely this. Carbon, which should be in the air, is pretty much now in the atmosphere. And the process of healing the carbon is to bring the carbon back and to resort to new, so-called innovative and new forms of energy, essentially solar on the solar, wind, and alternative forms of the energy. So the Academy of the Pontifical Academy of the Sciences and Social Sciences is undertaking several conferences and all to try to heal. So what you'll be seeing is a history of the Academy's attempt to heal the carbon experience of humanity with the different events that it's organized. Sometimes it's been about the chemicals in the atmosphere. Sometimes it's been about man's environment and tropical forests. Sometimes it's been about the geosphere and the biosphere, science for survival. And it goes on, interaction between global change and health, water issues and environment, the glaciers and the impact of a changing environment on the glaciers, and so on, until 2015, Pope Francis came out with this encyclical Laudato Si, Care for Our Common Home, which, the head of welcoming us referred to. And this is what the Pope invited us all to do, which again explains why we all gathered here. I urgently appeal then for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet. We need a conversation which includes everyone. And that underlines the introduction and the invitation of the youth in this event, and also, especially in Nairobi, to be part of this conversation. The future belongs to the youth. And so to everybody to face the challenge that we're undertaking and its human roots, concern, and all what affects us. So based on this, the Academy continued its research, science and sustainability, health of people and the planet, biological extinction on the threat, climate change, its impact on health, science and actions for species protection, climate change and the new evidence from science, engineering. All the evidence notwithstanding, there's still quite a bit of climate change deniers still around, and still the need to try to still convince the climate change deniers and everything that is happening. We may not have a chance to talk about this, but when this cycle of events began, the first experience was in Sacramento, California. And just before we began the event, which was in February, just after the great forest fires in California in January, when we began to do this event in Sacramento, a document came from the White House advising that the government documents may not make reference to climate change, global warming, and things like that. And so we needed to find alternative formulation and ways of language to deal with that. So it's still a challenge that we have, and the need still to talk about this with view to trying to convince as many as possible about the realities we're dealing with. So this led to a meeting that we held in 2024, in May 2024, when this meeting here was born. At that meeting, from climate crisis to climate resilience, the academies, the two academies, science and social sciences, got together to study this and recognize the introduction of a need to not only talk about adaptation and mitigation, but put great emphasis also on the human person, as the encyclical has suggested, talking about societal transformation. Not to talk about conversion, but to talk about societal transformation and the need for the human actors to change. So the priority then is to create a climate movement to elevate human and ecosystem resilience. So this led the academies to then begin to take this movement around, and the references we made over here. It's gone to Sacramento, it's gone to the Commonwealth of Boston, it's gone to Nairobi, it is now here. From here to go to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, in Brasilia, in Brazil, and from there, Australia and the Pacific Islands, and then come to Dakar for the Sahel region in Africa, and then go to India. And so we're taking it around, just spreading the message about the need for such a climate change. So ultimately then, it is to leave these concluding messages. So as you can see, and some of our scientists have already observed this, climate-related disasters or climate crisis reminds us of a couple of things. First, of the words of Pope Francis that a crisis is almost always the result of self-forgetting. And the way forward comes through recalling our roots and the time to recover values and to return to what is authentically worthwhile. That is the discussion that we hope to hold. Secondly, as a data-rich scientific problem, we may not fail to see the human faces behind these data and figures. It's not enough to talk about climate disasters, but the impact on people, lives, and all of that. And so to see the human faces behind these figures and become painfully aware, indeed to dare to turn what is happening to them and to the world into our own personal suffering and experiences, and with that to discover what each of us can do. So it is move away simply from observing features to making them our own. This we suspect, or we believe, is the beginning of the commitment to wanting to transform or change anything at all. And lastly, what each of us can do is to unite and to stand in solidarity. That's what we're doing. It's not the Pontifical Academy alone, it's now with the Austrian Academy, and wherever we go, it is to engage the local partners and the local groups to work on this issue. So to unite and stand in solidarity, to replan our journey, to set ourselves new rules, and to discover new forms of commitment. That's why the academies propose the MAST, mitigation, adaptation, and societal transformation, to shape a new vision for the future, because while there is still time to fix the problem, time should not be wasted. And that is what has brought us all here for this meeting. And so we renew our gratitude to the Austrian Academy of the Sciences for welcoming us and making this possible. And we hope that the message of this gathering will go far and wide and affect. Since Austria is between Eastern Europe and Western Europe, we have the challenge to make it spread. So thank you all for coming and welcoming us. Thank you.
Thank you, Cardinal Turkson, for reminding us of how vital solidarity is, but it's also power. And power also leads up to the national government. So I have the pleasure of introducing a quick video statement now from the Austrian Federal Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, Climate and Environmental Protection, Regions and Water Management, Norbert Tocznik. And right after, we will hear from Jürgen Schneider, who's the head of the Climate Department in the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. So without further ado,
dear President of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, dear President of the Austrian Academy of Sciences, dear participants, thank you very much for the kind invitation. It is a pleasure and a great honor to welcome you at this important conference. I appreciate your commitment to pursue the Climate Resilience Initiative started by Pope Francis. As the impacts of climate change increase, so does the urgency to base our political decisions on science. Climate science is essential for a successful climate policy and must remain the backbone to our response on climate change. Mitigation and adaptation efforts depend on your research, your insight, and your guidance. I wish you a productive and inspiring exchange of ideas over the coming days. Thank you, and enjoy your stay in Vienna.
Ja, Eminenzen, Präsident der Päpstlichen Akademie, der Österreichischen Akademie der Wissenschaften, sehr verehrte Teilnehmerinnen und Teilnehmer, Kolleginnen und Kollegen, auch von meiner Seite ein herzliches Danke für Ihr Leadership, für diese Initiative, die weltweit ist, die notwendig ist. Moderatorin hat es gesagt, ich möchte ein bisschen die österreichische Perspektive bringen. Wir sind ein Land, ein reiches Land, aber ein Land, das auch von der Klimakrise besonders betroffen ist. Wir wissen aus wissenschaftlichen Untersuchungen, dass die globale Erwärmung, die letztes Jahr 2024 erstmals die 1,5 Grad Celsius im Vergleich zur vorindustriellen Zeit überschritten hat, in Österreich ungefähr doppelt so stark ist. Wir haben eine Erwärmung von 3,1 Grad seit der vorindustriellen Zeit. Und es ist nicht nur ein Problem der wärmeren Temperaturen, wir haben auch Probleme mit zunehmenden Extremereignissen. Wir haben letztes Jahr im September die zweite 1000-jährige Regenereignis gehabt innerhalb der letzten 25 Jahre. Das heißt, wir sehen, dass Extremereignisse nicht nur in ihrer Häufigkeit, sondern auch in ihrer Schwere zunehmen. Wir sehen auch ökonomische Auswirkungen durch die Klimakrise. Österreich ist ein bewaldetes Land. Fast 50% unserer Staatsfläche sind Wald. Und wir haben aber gesehen, dass wir in den letzten Jahren fast 50% des Holzeinschlags in Österreich Schadholz waren. Das heißt, wir haben eine große Krise auch in unseren Wäldern. Die hat viele Ursachen, aber eine der wichtigsten Ursachen sind Trockenperioden, wo dann die entsprechenden Kulturen, die noch nicht klimafit sind, auch besonders anfällig sind. Das heißt, wir haben mannigfache Herausforderungen. Und diese mannigfachen Herausforderungen werden wir nur bewältigen, wenn wir evidenzbasierte Politik machen. Wir haben auch schon gehört, dass dieses Modell nicht in allen Staaten der Welt besonders hoch im Kurs ist. Wir haben Staatsführer, die nicht nur Klimaforschung behindern, sondern auch ganz bewusst nicht mehr darauf hören. Das ist sicherlich nicht der richtige Weg. Wir sind relativ stolz, in Österreich heuer den zweiten österreichischen Sachstandsbericht zum Klimathema vorgelegt bekommen zu haben. Für mich war das eine besondere Freude, weil beim ersten Sachstandsbericht durfte ich noch von der wissenschaftlichen Seite Mitherausgeber sein. Dieses Mal bin ich jetzt im Ministerium Mitauftraggeber gewesen. Und das ist natürlich eine Handelsanleitung und die genau auf das MAST-Prinzip einzahlt, nämlich nicht nur Minderung, nicht nur Anpassung, sondern auch gesellschaftliche Transformation. Ja, Österreich versucht Klimaschutz weiterzumachen. Für die, die hier im Land sind, Sie werden mitbekommen haben, wir haben in den letzten Tagen intensive Diskussionen über das sogenannte Klimagesetz gehabt. Wir haben da übrigens auch sehr Vorbild vom Wiener Klimagesetz genommen. Wir sind mitten in der Diskussion. Wir sind auch sehr optimistisch, dass wir das Ziel der Klimaneutralität 2040 im Gesetz selber referenzieren werden, so wie wir das im Regierungsprogramm auch vorgesehen haben. Das Gesetz wird auch wie das Wiener Gesetz nicht nur Mitigation, nicht nur Klimaschutz enthalten, sondern auch einen Verweis auf die Anpassung, auch einen Verweis auf die Kreislaufwirtschaft. Es wird insbesondere ein Governance-Gesetz sein, ähnlich wie das Wiener Gesetz, weil eben Klimaschutz und Anpassung an den Klimawandel nicht die Sache eines Ministers, nur der Regierung ist, sondern es ist ein gesamtgesellschaftliches Projekt, resilienter zu werden. Wir brauchen natürlich die Politik auf allen Ebenen, auf der internationalen, auf der europäischen, auf der nationalen, auf der regionalen, bei uns die Bundesländer und auf der Gemeindeebene. Aber wir brauchen natürlich auch die Unternehmen, wir brauchen die Bürgerinnen und Bürger, um hier erfolgreich zu sein. Und nachdem wir vorher schon gehört haben, dass Bekämpfung der Klimakrise letztendlich auch ein gemeinsames Lernen ist. Und ich war sehr beeindruckt von Ihrer Geschichte über die Päpstliche Akademie, wo Sie gesagt haben, einer der wichtigsten Punkte war, Sie waren ein Role Model, das dann ausgerollt werden konnte, das viele Länder auch übernommen haben. Vielleicht ein, zwei Beispiele noch aus Österreich. Wir haben im Bereich der Klimawandelanpassung auch sehr schnell gesehen, Anpassung funktioniert lokal und wir haben von Bundesseite eine Initiative gemacht, die sogenannten Klimawandelanpassungsregionen. Was machen wir da? Wir bezahlen Managerinnen und Manager, die aus den Regionen, aus den Gemeinden kommen, bilden sie aus, vernetzen sie, geben ihnen Instrumente an die Hand, dass sie in der Region genau nach den Bedürfnissen, die sie haben, Anpassungsmaßnahmen vorantreiben. Das ist nicht immer ganz einfach, weil Sie im Klimaschutz haben Sie oft Maßnahmen, die sich von alleine rechnen, wenn Sie an erneuerbare Energieerzeugung denken. Bei der Anpassung ist es oft so, dass auch die Finanzierung zu finden schwieriger ist. Aber wir haben jetzt gerade wieder ein Beispiel gesehen aus der Steiermark. Wir machen auch Wildbach- und Lawinenverbauung und versuchen da bei Schutz vor Naturkatastrophen als zweites Beispiel auch sehr Nature-Based Solutions zu propagieren. Und ein Beispiel aus der Steiermark, wir haben da als Ressort 30 Millionen Euro investiert und wir hatten in der Steiermark nicht das große Unwetter im September 24, sondern einige Monate davor. Und wir haben gesehen, dass ohne ein einziges Extremereignis, ohne diese Schutzvorrichtungen Kosten von 80 Millionen Euro verursacht hätte. Das heißt, Anpassung, Klimaschutz sind nicht nur ökologische Themen, sie sind ökonomische Themen und sie sind soziale Themen. In diesem Sinne, auch von meiner Seite, wünsche ich uns eine spannende, erkenntnisreiche Konferenz und noch einmal herzliches Danke für das Leadership in dieser Initiative. Wir haben einen langen Weg vor uns, aber ein langer Weg ist nur dann erfolgreich, wenn man schlicht und ergreifend ins Tun, ins Arbeiten und ins Gehen kommt. Herzlichen Dank.
Yeah, Jürgen Schneider, thank you for underscoring the necessity of the whole of government approach. All actors have a role to play in that, including us in the third sector at the Bertelsmann Stiftung. We focus specifically on issues like circular economy, on equity issues, on new financing models. So there was a lot of that to take away for us. We are going to look at what I think are truly the seismographs of change and innovation here, and those are cities in our first panel. 2.3 million people. Those are global warming and temperature-related deaths that Nature Medicine estimated could be the case in a case study they published in January in European cities. European city residents could face grave peril by 2099. That's not as far away as you might think if we don't introduce stringent measures to change what is coming toward us. Those fatalities could be cut by 2/3, and 2.3 million, that's more than a quarter of the population of New York City if we take preventative measures now. This is a study that looked at 854 urban cities across 30 city centers on the continent. So there is much to do, and I'm pleased that this next panel will do exactly that. We'll look at the challenges, but also at solutions that they have found in their urban surround. Professor von Braun will moderate this panel, but I am happy to welcome to the stage the Honorable Ricardo Rio, the mayor of Braga, who's also the executive committee chair of the Global Parliament of Mayors. I'm very pleased to welcome the Honorable Henriette Reker, the mayor of the city of Cologne, the Honorable Nina Abrahamczyk, the member of the Vienna City Council, who I've seen over there, Ada Amon, the executive director of the Budapest Climate Agency, and finally, Alistair Hannaford, WHO Youth Council co-chair and part of the World Organization of the Scout Movement. Please come to the stage. Thanks very much.
Welcome to this first panel. We already had quite a bit of substance in the opening, but this one is the panel on challenges and best practices for resilience. Mayors and local leaders is the heading. We want to get a perspective from the local level, but we want to also keep in mind to whom do we want to address. We want to address, of course, also national policymakers and the European Union, Parliament and Commission. So let's keep the addressees in mind when we talk to each other, because lots of things can be done and must be done at the local level, but there are also things which need to be done at central and at European level. I say so because European climate policy is under constant scrutiny. Later this year, in the fall, we will see a revised new bioeconomy strategy, a bio-based economy strategy, which closely relates to the climate agenda. So without further ado, I would like to call on the Mayor Ricardo Rio from Braga, Portugal. You are the Global Parliament Mayor's Parliament Coordinator. Tell us a little bit about that function. And I ask you, how about the importance of cities to reach the climate goals in Europe and beyond, and about concrete strategies you are proposing? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Professor. Good morning, distinguished guests and participants in this panel, my dear colleagues, Your Eminence, Cardinal Turkson, and all the academic representatives here. As it was mentioned by Professor Brown, I am the mayor of the city of Braga. Braga is the third most important city in Portugal after Lisbon and Porto. It's a city that gathers two unique features. It's one of the oldest cities in Europe, and at the same time is one of the youngest cities in Europe, because we have a population of nearly 40%, which is below 30 years old, which is something quite rare in developed countries. And it's also something that links perfectly with this conference in the way that it links to intergenerational dialogue to address these topics. And I think that's something that probably mobilized us to, since the beginning of my first term. I'm now finalizing my last term. In Portugal, we have a term limit of 3 mandates to address climate issues, sustainability issues as a clear priority for our city. I am also, as Professor mentioned, the current chairman of the Global Parliament of Mayors, a network of mayors that represents mayors from all the continents. But I'm also, together with the mayor of Vienna, a member of the ExCom of Eurocities and also a member of the Committee of Regions. And this is to say that in these all different roles, I have been advocating a lot to an idea that is present in this panel, which is that no global goal can be addressed and can be fulfilled without the engagement of the local authorities. And that's why I think it's very important to look at the reality that we have in these different territories, because we don't have, as we say in Portugal, to invent anything. We need to replicate the good examples and to scale up those globally. And that's why the interconnection between different cities and different realities, it is so important. To do so, I think that the first dimension that is crucial, Professor and colleagues, is the political will. No result is achieved without the political commitment, without the political leadership, and that is why I think that there needs to be, at these different levels of government, a clear commitment to these topics. Then a second dimension, which is obviously important, is that this isn't addressed on a circumstantial basis. It has to have a strategy. We need to know the reality, as in any other matter. We need to make the acknowledgement of the reality that we have in our territory. We need to develop a midterm strategy and to identify concrete initiatives that we need to develop in the near future. Then, to do so, we need data. And I think that's one of the major challenges that we have to deal at the local level when we are talking about climate policy, which is the lack of, let's say, reliable information, or at least updated information in terms of data, to exchange this information. And this connects with also something that is very important and very present in this conference, which is the link between policy and science. We always try to connect the university institutions with the research institutions to bring them to support the development of our policies, to support us in the development of our strategy, and specifically to monitor the results that we are achieving, because that also links with another important factor that was already mentioned, which is the accountability and the credibility of this accountability. Because as we work with independent institutions, it's not a political presentation that we make to the society. It's something that is built together with institutions that are obviously more capable to do this type of work than the municipality, for instance, it is in my case. Then, last remark in terms of global strategy, it's the link with the society, of course, because we don't achieve results just by working at the public level. We need to engage the business sector, we need to engage the other institutions, we need to engage the individual citizens in our territories. And that is why, in my city, we have established a governance model that has been put in value recently by the European Commission when they acknowledged us as rising innovative city in Europe, because this governance model applies to all the levels of the government, including the sustainability and climate action that we developed, in which we engage the local stakeholders, in which we create a council for supporting the development of our policies, and finally, to obviously engage the citizens in these initiatives. As for Braga, our reality is quite peculiar because we are a city that has developed a climate pact since almost the beginning of the Covenant of Mayors. We have reviewed it 3 times. We have concrete objectives that are public. We have a reduction. We want to achieve a reduction of 55% of our carbon emissions until 2030 and a completely neutrality until 2050. Our achieving 80% until 2040. We are not so ambitious as Vienna because our starting point is obviously much more difficult, and that is also connected with one issue. The fact is that in my city, the major problem is mobility. Is mobility because in the latest Eurobarometer, we had the worst ranking to be in #1. We had a lot of positive ones in terms of quality of life, but there's one that I didn't want to be in #1, which is the mobility area precisely. We have 60% of our citizens that use cars to move around in our city. And what we tried to do in recent years was to make a societal transformation, to change the culture of our citizens and to provide them alternatives to move around with quality, with comfort, with safety. And that's why we have been investing heavily in the public transportation system. When I started my mandate in 2013, I had an average age of the bus fleet of 17 years, which is something that you would also believe impossible for a country like Portugal. But the fact is that in these recent years, we have invested heavily in the renewal of this bus fleet. We have now 60% of our bus fleet fully electric, so new buses circulating without pollution in the city. We are now investing in a major project of the bus rapid transit, which is also revolution in terms of the transport system in the city. And we have also been investing in realities like the enlargement of the pedestrian zones, in the spreading of bike lanes and other soft modes, so that we can obviously, since early stages, stimulate people to use other modes of transport. And this work with youngsters, it's my final remark, it's something that we believe it's very important because we work with schools so that youngsters are the source of inspiration for their parents and for their families and friends, so that they are the ones that call for the use of public transportation, for the use of bikes, for the use of walking projects. And that is why we have specific projects like the school bus that we are now providing to the whole city to allow students to go to school without any cost and with the collection points so that they don't need to have to be transported by their parents until the school. Or for instance, the Pedi bus, which is a pedestrian approach to this project, or the bike train in which kids go with their bikes but with a monitor to accompany them to school. And that is also a way to change the behavior of these youngsters and obviously to create an impact for the future.
Okay, thank you very much. This panel doesn't have enough time to dig into everything, but you mentioned we have invested. Tell us maybe briefly, how did you mobilize finance for your investment?
Well, in Portugal, we are beneficiaries of the European funding. So most of these investments have been made with the support of European funding. And I think that's also a critical issue because as I accompany the reality of many cities in all over Europe, there are two topics which are clearly crucial. One is financing, because not every city has access to this type of investments. But the second one, which is also as much important, is the capacity building. And that is also something that at the European level, you were mentioning in the introduction, the importance of addressing the European responsibles. And I think that's one of the ideas that we need to spread. The idea it is to invest in capacity building at the local level so that municipalities can obviously have the knowledge to develop this type of policies.
Excellent. Mayor Rio, can we look to you to give us a commitment to spread the message from this conference to the global Parliament of Mayors?
Obviously, the Global Parliament of Mayors has been quite committed with these topics of climate change. Actually, we had a very interesting project with the British Council, which was focused in the impact of climate in the migrations in the Global South, which is something that we need to be aware. In Europe, we suffer a lot from other phenomena, but the migrations that are a result of the climate impact is something that is addressing mostly in the Global South. And obviously, we are willing to share this experience and this message and this document.
Thank you. We want to connect to that institution in coming global conferences. Mayor Reker, very pleased to have you here. You were at the initial conference in the Vatican, playing already a significant role there, representing the beautiful city of Cologne. I'm in a suburb of Cologne, city of Bonn. So tell us, many of my institute's members prefer to live in Cologne because it's bigger, more international, and so on. Tell us about Cologne and your climate strategies and your achievements.
Ja, vielen Dank, Eminenzen. Schön, dass Sie hier geblieben sind. Ich freue mich auch über es war ja kein Grußwort, sondern es war ein Fachvortrag von Ihrem Bürgermeister, Professor Ludwig, der gezeigt hat, wie leidenschaftlich auch der Bürgermeister hinter dem Klimaziel stehen muss, lieber Herr Professor von Braun, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren. Ich möchte mal ganz anders anfangen. Ich freue mich, dass Sie hier ein Bild von Köln sehen können. Es wird auch das einzige Bild dieses Folienvortrags, den ich vorbereitet habe, bleiben, weil ich glaube, dass wir uns alle in den Herausforderungen, die wir haben, wiederholen werden. Und wichtig ist, dass wir uns einig werden über die Maßnahmen, die wirken und dass wir zusammenwirken, um die Maßnahmen zum Erfolg zu bringen. Köln ist die viertgrößte Stadt Deutschlands mit 1,1 Millionen Einwohnern. Man kommt nach Köln. Natürlich, Menschen leben da, arbeiten da. Sonst kommen Menschen zum Beten nach Köln, in den Dom, der immer noch der Mittelpunkt unserer Stadt ist. Sie kommen nach Köln, um Kultur zu erleben. Die Menschheitsgeschichte kann man in Köln erleben, 2000 Jahre römisch gegründet bis jetzt. Und sie kommen nach Köln zum Feiern. Manchmal bringen sie auch Emissionen mit, aber da wir zwar beschlossen haben, in Köln bis 2035 klimaneutral zu sein und auch über ein Gutachten verfügen, das uns gezeigt hat, es ist grundsätzlich möglich, arbeiten wir daran, wie alle anderen auch, den Verkehr umzustellen, die Heizung umzustellen mit einer kommunalen Wärmeplanung. Die gibt es vorgeschrieben in Deutschland, soll Mitte nächsten Jahres fertig sein. Das gilt natürlich auch für Köln. Aber wir erleben eben, genauso wie der Bürgermeister von Wien es eben gesagt hat, viele Ereignisse, die die Menschen eigentlich aufmerksam sein lassen sollten, dass es schon nach 12 ist, um die Klimakrise so abzuschwächen, dass sie uns ein lebenswertes Leben auch weiterhin möglich sein wird. Was können wir tun? Erstmal können wir oder müssen wir alle zusammenarbeiten. Wir tun das in Köln natürlich mit privaten, aber auch mit allen städtischen Gesellschaften. Jeder leistet seinen Beitrag, um klimaneutral möglichst bis 35 zu werden. Das ist ein sehr sportliches Ziel. Wir haben eben gehört, 2040, 2045. Das erscheint mir auch im Ende realistischer, aber sportliche Ziele muss man ja haben, um daran zu arbeiten. Ich glaube, dass das allergrößte Ziel, was wir haben müssen, ist wirklich die Menschen, die davon betroffen sein werden, zu erreichen und keine Geschichte zu erzählen, die nur von Krise und Verzicht spricht, sondern die von einem lebenswerten Umfeld spricht und das zu einer positiven Ausstrahlung kommen lässt, was wir alles tun. Und dass man natürlich investieren muss, um sein Lebensumfeld positiv zu gestalten, das leuchtet ja auch jedem und jeder ein. Aber das ist uns noch nicht gelungen, obwohl die Kölner sind eigentlich leicht zu begeistern. Aber es ist eben so, dass nur als Stadt alleine man diese Herausforderungen nicht handeln kann. Also ich bin sehr froh, dass auch das Thema Klimawandel, Klimafolgenanpassung immer wieder in Konferenzen und auch in Wort- und Medienbeiträgen aufgenommen wird, weil wir dürfen das Thema auch nicht zurückstellen. Deutschland, gut, wir leben weltweit in politischen Krisensituationen, aber es darf uns auf keinen Fall passieren, dass wir dieses Thema zurückstellen. Und wir müssen eine positive Geschichte erzählen und wir müssen eine Geschichte erzählen, die dann zum Erfolg führen wird, wenn alle zusammenarbeiten. Und mit allen meine ich alle, denn es wurde schon betont, es hat auch einen sehr wichtigen sozialen Aspekt, dass es uns wirklich gelingt, die Schöpfung zu bewahren.
Danke. The obstacles which you have mentioned, and we will repeat these obstacles. You warned us, let's not be too obstacle focused. But how do you deal with them? And how do you mobilize people in Cologne from the schools, from civil society? Because this is a multi-stakeholder conference here. How do you deal with that in order to have impact?
Also wir machen schon in Kindertagesstätten, wir geben, ich weiß nicht, ob Ihnen das Pixie-Buch bekannt ist. Ich sage immer das Taschenbuch für Kinder. Das ist so ein kleines quadratisches Format. Und das wird schon in den Kindertagesstätten herausgegeben, und zwar auch mit einer positiven Botschaft. Wir machen Kampagnen auf den City Lights, wo dann steht, wir wünschen uns also 0% Emissionen. Wir machen immer wieder viele Öffentlichkeitsveranstaltungen, die, wie gesagt, positiv prononciert sind. Und wir schaffen es auch zusehend bei einer wachsenden Stadt, auch Köln ist eine wachsende Stadt, den Flächenverbrauch, weil die Flächen stehen ja zunehmend auch in Konkurrenz, so zu gestalten, dass wir kombinieren. Also nicht nur wird das Dach dann eben begrünt, sondern es bekommt auch eine Photovoltaikanlage. Und mittlerweile, und das ist auch meine große Hoffnung, auch Köln ist eine Stadt mit mehr als 100.000 Studierenden, mit vielen klugen Köpfen, die ausgebildet werden bei uns. Also wir versuchen, auch Flächenverbrauche so zu strukturieren, dass wir immer sowohl das eine als auch das andere verwirklichen und auch immer an den Klimaschutz denken. Und wir monitoren das natürlich, um auch der Öffentlichkeit zu zeigen, ihre Mühe, zu einer lebenswerten Umwelt zu kommen, wird belohnt.
Ja, danke. As an outgoing mayor, you will be a free person in a couple of months or so. No longer with the burden of office, you can speak even more freely. You have always spoken freely and openly about issues. So I ask you for your commitment to stick to our initiative in the future. Given all your experience, it will be very important to have you on board. Say yes to this.
That's no problem. It's my honor to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask Nina Abrahamczyk, a member of the Vienna City Council. We would love to hear about successful initiatives if you can elaborate further on what the mayor said already. Maybe dig a little bit deeper. We got already a comprehensive presentation from the mayor right here, which impressed all of us. But tell us more and tell us about obstacles and how you jumped over them.
Thank you very much. It's, yes, actually quite difficult after our mayor from Vienna already talked about so many projects.
That's how it should be.
Yes, exactly. But it makes my job a little bit easier. And I just want to remind you and point out that there's this really great exhibition on Vienna and climate resilience right in the next room over there. So you can go over there and learn more about different projects. I want to focus on something that has already been said, and I'd like to sum it up in we're all in this together. No city, no country, no continent by itself is going to solve the climate crisis by itself. And it's about the people. And especially as a politician and as politicians in leading roles in cities, it's very important to focus on the people who live here. Whether they are allowed to vote or not, they are all part of our society. And I think it's also something that's typical for cities in Europe, that we have many people who live in our cities and who are not allowed to vote. So participation is something that's really important. If we want to involve people in solutions regarding the climate crisis, I mean, there are these really big projects like our mayor mentioned the sewage treatment facility. That's something that's not very accessible to people. Actually, I mean, I'm no expert in physics and chemistry, so that's not the typical thing you'd involve people. But if we look at climate adaptation, every single person, every one of you, everyone out on the street is an expert, because where we live in our immediate neighborhoods, we all know what does not work. We all know what could maybe raise our quality of living. Whether it's a little bench in the shadow to take a rest when you come back from the supermarket, or a public transit station that should be a little bit nearer, or where too many stairs. People are experts. And that's why I would like to tell you a little bit about the Vienna Climate Team, because that's where we focus on different districts every year, where we invite people to tell us, in times of climate crisis, what do you need in your neighborhood? What are good solutions? What are ideas you have? And the important thing is that it's a process that takes a whole year. We invite everyone to send us and tell us their ideas. We involve experts from the city administration who can tell them which ideas are possible to realize. And it's not about having a project at the beginning, but to gather all these ideas and find solutions and projects. We have a representative citizens jury in every district who chooses the projects that are realized. And something that my fellow politicians probably know, we very often have projects that take years to realize. The important thing in the Vienna Climate Team is that the projects that are chosen have to be realized within 2 years. So people can see that it made a difference, that they were part of this climate team. As you probably know, whenever you invite people to participate somewhere, there are always people who will join you, people who will come. Some of them I call the usual suspects. Many people studied at universities who are older, but not everyone can participate. It might be about time as a resource. So you really should look at who's missing and try to involve these people. That's why I'm very proud that in one of the districts we had the Caritas who worked with us at the Vienna Climate Team, and they focused on a group that's usually not represented in any way, people without homes, people who live on the streets. So they gathered the people they already work with and asked them, what do you need in your immediate neighborhood? What's your life, or what make your life better? And I think that's so important. We always have people that are not heard enough. And we should focus on that, because what we know in the climate crisis is there's a part of people who actually causes a lot of emissions, but there are way more people who are affected by the climate crisis. It's usually the very young, the very old, the chronically ill, people who work outside in heat waves, like construction workers or mobile care nurses, for example. So I think it's really important that people have the information and an understanding and awareness regarding climate, but to also engage them. And it was already said that we're a European capital of democracy. That's why I wanted to focus on that, because it's about our public spaces, which can actually be seen as our shared living rooms as a society in every city. And I know that the climate crisis, for many people, there's a lot of fear, a lot of concerns. We hear what we have to renounce, what we are going to lose, but I want to emphasize what you already said. I think there's also a lot we can gain as a society. We can work together and look out for each other. And as a city administration, it's our job to work on that. Whether it's the drinking fountain, and there are more than 1,000 in Vienna throughout the city, because in heat waves it's especially important to stay hydrated. Whether it's cooling zones where you can work and cooperate with existing institutions. I mean, this could be a museum, which is usually air-conditioned. This could also be a church, because the old buildings with very thick walls usually stay way cooler in the summer. Work with institutions and corporations you already have. We work a lot with youth centers, for example, because nice as it was that our mayor said that I'm a young politician. I mean, I'm 43. I'm not youth anymore. But it's easier as the city administration to reach young people if we work with institutions they already feel comfortable with. And that's usually youth centers. And yeah, so I think the most important things are information, understanding and awareness, cooperation and networking. We can so much learn from each other. That's why I like networks like the Eurocities, for example. And also always think about how to involve people, because we have to keep them in focus.
Thank you so much for shining light on those people who often are not recognized. Climate change and climate crisis has unequal effects. Everyone is affected, but not in the same way. And you mentioned homeless people, how they suffer under heat waves and rainstorms and so on. We need to have this in perspective. Now, this conference will somewhat in the future be identified with Vienna. I ask you for your commitment to embrace that conference outcome and not let it simply pass by as a group of interested tourists again in this beautiful city. What do you say? How can you follow up on this conference, given that we put the limelight on your agenda?
Yeah, use the networks. Just stay in contact. If you meet someone, get to know someone, maybe get their contact details and try to stay in contact. And I think the really great thing, and that's why thank you very much for choosing Vienna as the location for this conference. I think the very interesting part is that there are so many meetings over a few years. And I just, recommend to look to other cities or institutions for best practices. Also share our failures, actually, because not everything we do always works out, but we have to learn. And that's why science is so important.
Let me tell you how decisions sometimes are made. We were standing at the evening reception together with Sister Helen Alford and John Schellenhuber in the courtyard of the Pontifical Academy of Science. At the meeting last year, and thought about, well, where in Europe should we meet? And we were reflecting that we had a lot of very strong support from Western Europe, but we wanted to embrace Central and Eastern Europe. And so it was the logical consequence, Vienna, that should it be. And I'm really grateful that the city and this academy, the Austrian Academy of Science, accepted our call, and I'm pleased to see also a lot of representation from Central and Eastern Europe. And that's why I would like to call on you, Ada Amon, the director, executive director of Budapest Climate Agency. Tell us, how about Budapest? What are preconditions of successful urban climate resilience programs? Of course, national legislation and policies play a role, but next door Budapest, your strategies and your perspective, please.
Well, thank you very much for having Budapest here, and I'm very lucky to be able to represent this also very beautiful city. It's beautiful because it was built on the plan of Vienna. So Vienna was the role model of Budapest, and that's why we are learning a lot and have been studying the Viennese climate strategy and have a very frequent exchange of climate policies, energy, sponge city concept, and all the bike and walk related measures in Budapest also. But as it goes to the preconditions of a good city climate policy and climate strategy, I guess the national policies, as you mentioned, is a very important prerequisite. And the State Secretary, Mr. Schneider, mentioned those countries or those governments which are trying to impede or kind of questioning the importance and the significance of climate change and the related climate policy. I guess Hungary is one of those, although not that impactful and effective as other bigger countries. But certainly in terms of a city or cities' climate measures and policies, it has an impact, and certain Central Eastern European government has the tendency to to question the climate policy and also minimize the importance of this. Sometimes just because the share of emission of these little countries are so tiny that it would just disappear. But if we neglect mitigation policies, then probably adaptation will be, as we know, comes at a much higher cost, and then mitigation will be forgotten in the hurdle of trying to save people and adapt to the impacts of climate change. And I think Budapest is one of those cities which are very much impacted by climate change, obviously. What I think is that Budapest and many cities in Europe have a much better climate policy than national climate policies. And it's because we are so close to those impacts and we are so knowledgeable and we gather those data and we are much closer to those data, which is needed to create a much better climate policy, which are close to people, and we learn from people by, reaching out and pulling in their knowledge of the issue and how to tackle and how to cope with that on a city level. And so, therefore, I guess, and I don't want to go into the details of our, fight with the national government for accessing EU funding, which is very critical in financing energy efficiency, public transportation modernization and comfort measures, and also transforming the whole city and the infrastructure and maintain the infrastructure, and also develop it in a way that it will cope with the further and future climate effects. So what I'm trying to say here that without huge amount of money, cities cannot be converted to climate resilient cities and habitats of people. And more people are trying to live in cities, and therefore it is even more important to create it, because when people don't want to live in cities, it's going to be a very bad situation, and we don't want to get to that place. So what we are advocating for from Budapest and with lots of European organizations together is that we would like to have money, EU funding, directly going to regions rather than blocked by those governments which are trying to block it from those cities like Budapest, which is basically a punishment of the Hungarian government for not voting well for.
Well, thank you. That call needs to be loud and clear, and you have said so. Let me give it a different twist. Cities have hinterlands. Cities have neighboring smaller towns. Cities, as we have just heard from Vienna and Cologne and Budapest, are well equipped with knowledge, with analysis, and often also with finance. We heard it from Braga. But the small town is not. What's the responsibilities for you big city players vis-a-vis small town in your vicinities? Can there be new partnerships? Can there be commitment to pull them along?
Well, not just in the vicinity. I think big cities and metropolitan cities have a responsibility of spreading and exporting that best practices, what we have been pulling together and have a catalog of what to do in what circumstances. I started working for Budapest in 2019, and since that time we built up a quite big 35 people team working on climate and energy and environment. And it has never been there yet before that. And big cities have a tendency and capacity to attract money, to bring in fresh, important knowledge from Europe, from other cities, from Vienna, Munich, Braga, and Bilbao, which can be then transferred in smaller cities and mid-size mezzo cities, and therefore I believe we have responsibilities to transfer that important knowledge.
Thank you. Well, recognizing responsibility is a basis for commitment. Thank you for your sense of responsibility. Alistair Hannaford is the WHO Youth Council co-chair of the World Organization and with the World Organization of the Scout Movement. Alistair, we have been in touch a lot in the run-up to this conference. You have been instrumental in mobilizing your surroundings and your community. You are of the opinion that young people are already instrumental in the climate agenda. Give us more concrete insights, how you play this and how you see the future.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and to be with so many amazing people on this panel in particular. I think that there are so many things that I have learned, both from my time as a scout and from my time on the Youth Council, that really inform a lot of the discussion here. I think an important starting point for that is World Scouting is the largest single youth contribution to realizing the SDGs. To date, 60 million young people around the world have contributed 2.7 billion service hours within their local communities, because this is what so many youth organizations are. Yes, we have international and global representation, but at the end of the day, we are local grassroots organizations built within communities in collaboration with local governments, with schools, with community organizations, and it is through community engagement which is so fundamental to so much of our work. Last year, with the facilitation of Dr. Brigitte Mon and the Bertelsmann Stiftung, the Youth Council were able to meet in Berlin to discuss so many important points around the way forwards for youth engagement in global health. As a consequence of this, we were able to adopt the Youth Declaration on Creating Healthy Societies. This sets out a roadmap based on our own grassroots organizational needs, the needs we saw of young people around the world, but also a vision for the future where young people are central to decision-making on global health, on climate resilience, and on addressing these issues. It set out the need for comprehensive curricula, the need for investing in young people, and for engaging young people meaningfully in decision-making processes. But as I said, it was fundamentally rooted in our grassroots work already. World Scouting, through the Scout method, is engaged in learning by doing, in facilitating a progressive learning journey for young people, which is so central to one of the ways we realize this. It is also fundamental to the Scout method that it is engaged in the community. And so just one way in which we do this through our global health programming is that actually young people decide what they make of it in their local communities. One of the highest awards within Scouting for young people is the Scouts of the World Award, which begins with a facilitated journey on the SDGs and how young people can contribute to realizing the SDGs, but it ends with 80 hours of volunteering, which the young person must decide for themselves, direct in a very clear way, and must lead on. As part of my Scouts of the World Award, I decided that I would set up a new Scout group to target young people within my area who were unable to scout because I scout in a very weird place anyway. And because I am a migrant, I scout with British Scouting Overseas and engaging young people who live too far away from major hubs to engage in British language scouting. It was through this process that I had to build new skills, that I had to build relationships, and that I had to engage with people to ensure that young people could engage in scouting. But every day, young people as young as 6 are doing the same things. And we're starting from a young age with developing those skills on climate education, on peace education, on health education, where they're directing their knowledge in the way they want to learn, and they are developing community engagement and engaging with local governments, either in advocacy or in developing projects from a young age in the manner that they want to. This means that the way in which we are engaging young people is not prescriptive, and it allows them to respond to those local needs, those needs that they know so well. I remember as a Cub Scout when I was very young, not that I'm that much older yet, but deciding that a local path near where we lived was covered in litter. It was a towpath next to the river. And so we as a group of scouts decided to go out and clear up that path, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of our community as a whole. Around the world, scouts are doing similar things. They're on the front line of conflict. They're on the front line responding to the needs of humanitarian crises, whether that's flooding, whether that's receiving asylum seekers at borders. Scouting around the world is providing a framework through which to greet people where they need them, to respond to that need, and to ensure that together we can address these global issues. And I think that brings me back to the kind of outset of what does the Youth Council really bring to this discussion? Because I think so much of the work that we're doing, whether it's from the Scouts, whether it's from student organizations, from other youth advocacy groups, working on concrete issues at the grassroots, how do we bring that together in the global context? Because I think this is where a lot of our biggest questions are, how we address the discussion of uplifting other young people's voices, how we collectively formulate the approach we want to take on these issues. Over the next year and over the last year and the next year going forward, we have worked concretely on addressing issues that young people face relating to planetary health, relating to accessibility and equity, both within the global health governance sphere, but also within more concrete grassroots engagement, and on promoting health education and literacy. But one of our biggest cross-cutting issues on all 3 of these points is not how we engage more at the global level, because thanks to the endorsement of the Director General of the World Health Organization and the support of people like Brigitte, we have been able to effectively engage on those issues at some of the most important spaces and be invited to spaces like this. One of our biggest issues, however, is ensuring that young people around the world, across Europe, are able to engage with the World Health Organization's regional and country offices, with local governments, either at a national level or at a subnational level, ensuring that actually young people in every space are given the opportunity to really shape concrete policy. Fundamentally, as a Scout, I believe that starts in the Scout group. Our structure enables young people to design the program as they want it from that young age, but it also falls on schools and local governments to meet young people, to engage with young people, and to encourage them to really want to design and co-create the world. Because yes, I think the point that all the young people in the room would agree with, we are already leading, but there is so much more capacity when adults and young people and children create that intergenerational dialogue to really address the problems in a collective, sustainable manner that really enables that societal transformation we're all here to discuss.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know if this was known to many of you, how well youth around the world are now organized. I have learned that in the process of these conferences. I have learned that Africa has about 8 million scouts. And they played a key role at our conference in Nairobi, our climate resilience conference in Nairobi. You may also have recognized that Alastair brought in the United Nations. The WHO, the World Health Organization, holds the supportive infrastructure for the Global Youth Council. So there is a key role of the United Nations in our agenda, not only the UNCCC, Julia nodding from the Secretariat in Bonn, but also much broader across the UN agencies. Alastair, I'm not asking you for a commitment because you are completely committed to the agenda which you laid out, but I close with making myself a commitment. So far, only one of my 6 grandchildren have joined the Scouts, so I will try to encourage the others too. Anyway, colleagues...
You're never too old to be a Scout. You can also join.
I'm your volunteer. Colleagues, you want to ask some questions, do so in the coffee break, because we are over time. I want to thank this wonderful panel to kick us off with the core agenda of what cities do, what they can do, what they are committed to. And I would like to hand over to our moderator. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. So the number one takeaway is that my 6-year-old is joining the Scouts tomorrow. Alastair, that was, I think, some of the most impressive pieces I've heard here, but what I took from all of you was the necessity for agency. As cities already in their density are a collection of agency, but I particularly, Nina, appreciated your point about what do we do with the unseen, and are we seeing what we need to see? And I think all of you have spoken to the importance of going one step deeper to mobilize that agency. So thank you to this panel. I want to say, yes, coffee is served, but only for those of you who are dying of caffeine deficit, because we are truly behind time, though filled with much energy and new ideas. We want to move straight on to the next panel. If you need to take a bio break, get coffee, get a snack, please do so. But we're going to move on without further ado to this next panel. Thank these wonderful individuals for their insights one more time.